Hello, everyone. All right, today we're going to continue we're going to finish up Chapter 17, The Allies Defeat Germany. This is Part 3. We already talked about D-Day as the Allies pushed through, captured Paris. The Americans invaded South France, moved up, linked up with Patton and the Montgomery. They tried to end the war quicker, the Operation Market Garden. That was a disaster. So we're going to pick up after that. This will be the biggest battle the Americans fought in the war, the Battle of the Bulge, and we'll go to the bridge at Remagen in the end of the war as far as the Allies are concerned. All right, so hope you enjoy this. Hope you enjoyed your weekend, by the way. Oh, by the way, how good was the Viking draft? All right, not bad. All right, it's a rainy Sunday afternoon, but I know you're seeing this Monday morning. Or Monday afternoon, or whenever you get up. Now, as I mentioned, the Battle of Bulge would be the largest and bloodiest battle fought by the United States in World War II. The Allies would call it, in all their official things, the Ardennes counteroffensive. The actual phrase and the name Battle of the Bulge was actually made up by newspapermen. You're going to see this later, how they when the German advanced into the Allied lines, it formed a bulge in the Allied lines, and that's where it got its nickname. And the name stuck, and that's what we use today. Now, Hitler believed the Germans had enough resources for one last great offensive. He planned a winter offensive through the Ardennes forest. This is what they had done in 1940, though that was springtime. So they were going to do it again. The Ardennes was not well defended. There was only about 80,000 American soldiers. It might seem like a lot, but it really wasn't, considering they had over 1 million men there. Now, they didn't put a lot of men in the Ardennes because they felt that because of the terrain. As we mentioned earlier in the year, the Ardennes had heavy forested hills and lots of streams, not too many roads, and it was also winter, so there was a lot of snow on the ground. So the Allies really thought that they could, didn't have to put a lot of men there. The German goal was to split the Allied forces and capture Antwerp. Hitler believed that both the Americans and the British would actually give up at this point and ask for peace. Hitler totally underestimated the resolve of the Americans and the British. They were never going to give up. Now, there's a little bit delay here in my computer. We're waiting for it. I get a drink here in the meantime. All right, key for the Germans. One, they had to quickly capture a number of small little towns that had important roads. There weren't very many roads, as I already mentioned, and these roads went through these towns. So they had to capture the towns. All right, that was important. Speed was very important. They had to capture key bridges over these small little rivers. If they did not, they wouldn't be able to get through the rivers, and that would slow them up. And a major problem the Germans had is they were very low on fuel, diesel fuel for their tanks. So a key thing was they wanted to capture American fuel supplies because they were low on gasoline. And here we go again. All right, December 16th, 1944, the Germans launched their offensive. It was called Wacht am Rhein, which is, in English, translates to Operation Watch on the Rhine. The weather was very bad, keeping the Allied planes grounded. That helped the Germans because the Allied planes would shoot and destroy the German tanks. 4 panzer armies, 200,000 German soldiers, and over 340 tanks led the breakthrough. Now here we see the map. The blue line is the line between the Germans on the right-hand side and the Allies on the left. But as the Germans pushed through, they start capturing a lot of territories. But one of the things you can see a little blue circle there. It's right, where is it? There it is. That is the Belgian city, or I should say Belgian town of Bastogne. The Allies hold on to that, and the Germans are forced to move around it, which slows them down. They continue to advance onward, and you can see the bulge here in the American lines where the nickname comes from. This is as far as the Germans got. Now, the Americans were caught by surprise. Hundreds of American soldiers are captured. This led to one of the war crimes that occurred on December 17th. SS soldiers shot and killed about 80 American prisoners of war in the small town of Malmedy. So it got the name the Malmedy Massacre. Here's the picture of the American soldiers who had been shot by the German SS. They did photograph the numbers are there because they use these as evidence in a war crimes trial. The German commander was hanged as a war criminal after the war was over. Now, the Americans do a great job slowing the Germans down. Two American divisions, the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions in the northern sector, heavily outnumbered 5-1, held up the Germans. Engineers blew up bridges so the German tanks couldn't cross rivers. They destroyed fuel supplies so the Germans couldn't use them. So you can see here that the things are not going as well as the Germans hoped they would go. Now, on December 21st, the 101st Airborne was surrounded in Bastogne. It was a key road intersection. They just refused to surrender. This was among the 101st was the band of brothers that we see in the HBO series who were at Bastogne. Their commander, a Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, he was the commander of the 101st, was told of the Nazis' demand to surrender. He responded with just one word, nuts. The Germans really didn't understand what he meant by that. That's McAuliffe there on the left. Now, they hold up the Germans for 5 critical days. They never give up. Now, the Germans are forced to go around Bastogne, which slows them down, but they continue to push 30 miles into the Allied lines. But the Allies start closing in from the north and the south. Bradley comes from the south. He sends the Third Army with General Patton. Montgomery comes from the north. Here we see American Sherman tanks heading toward Bastogne and cutting off the German advance. Now, December 28th, weather clears. Allied planes started to attack the German panzers. By Christmas Eve, the German advance is effectively stalled just short of the Meuse River. The Germans had outrun their supply lines. Shortages of fuel and ammunition were becoming critical. They were unable to capture certain key bridges, and the panzer losses, which had been very light, started to go up. Here we see some American soldiers passing a German Panther tank. Here's another one that was wrecked by the Allies. They started capturing more prisoners. By December 26th, the day after Christmas, Patton's Third Army reaches Bastogne. Patton always claimed that he rescued the 101st Airborne. They hate that, the 101st. They hate that he says that because they felt they were holding out and didn't need to be rescued. By January 7th, Hitler finally allows the German troops to withdraw. Fighting went on for another 3 weeks, but Germany had lost the battle. By the 25th of January, they had pulled back to their original lines of defense. German losses in the battle were critical in several respects. First, there was the last of the German reserves were now gone. 2, the Luftwaffe, what was ever left of it, had been shattered. And 3, the remaining German forces in the west were being pushed back to the defenses of the Siegfried Line. They would just be fighting a defensive war from now on. There'd be no more offensive attacks. Now here is the American, the Americans, actually I should say, suffered 89,000 casualties, including 19,000 killed. This is a memorial that's built near Bastogne. It commemorates those that died in the battle. It's shaped like an American star. It has all the names of the states on it. You can see up here on the left is New Jersey. Now, last December on the 16th, 2019, they had a memorial service there. It was the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. The Allies has sent representatives from all the major countries, and here you can see them holding a moment of silence. The Battle of the Bulge monument is in Martesson, which is just outside Bastogne. Okay, now we're going to look at the last section, Germany's last stand in the West. Germany's last line of defense was the Rhine River, 766 miles long from Switzerland in the south up north to the North Sea. The average width of the river is 1,300 feet, or about a little over 4 football fields. Because of the mountains the river goes through, the current, it squeezes the water, so the current gets to be very fast as it runs through, heads north. Here we see a map as the Allies approach. Now, if you remember in the last section, let's see if I can do this here. Okay, the Operation Market Garden, they tried to come through this area. That failed, so now they're going to try to see if they can just push through here in the center. Now, to keep the Allies from crossing the Rhine River, the Germans blew up all the bridges across the Rhine to keep the Allies from crossing. All but one. There was a railroad bridge at Remagen, the Ludendorff Bridge. It had been built after World War I. The German commanders who were in charge of these bridges were put in a very difficult situation by Hitler and the High Command. They were told to blow the bridges up before the Americans could cross them, but not before every bit German soldiers could escape. So they had to wait till every German soldier was across and then blow it up before any of the American soldiers could get over. So their timing was really difficult. Now they had wired it with explosives. They waited till the last German troops pulled over as the Americans were heading toward the bridge, and they detonated the explosives. And there was a large explosion, cloud of smoke, debris. And then when the smoke cleared, the bridge was still standing. It was very well built. The Americans who were right there saw the bridge was still there and had not fallen into the river. Now, on March 7th, the American soldiers of the 9th Armored Division of the 1st Army rushed across the bridge and capture it. This enabled the U.S. Army to establish a bridgehead on the eastern side of the Rhine. Here we see a picture of the bridge and the Americans taking control of it. They had to send engineers down below and pull out all the wires and remove all the explosives, and they would go about starting to strengthen the bridge because, I mean, it had been weakened because of the explosion. Here we see a picture from above. I like this picture. You can see that sign there on the right. Now, cross the Rhine River with dry feet, courtesy of the 9th Armored Division. The Germans did everything they could to destroy the bridge after it was captured. They even tried firing W2 rockets at it. It did, unfortunately, it collapsed on its own 10 days later. They did everything they could. The Army engineers were trying to fix it up. It did collapse and unfortunately killed 18 of the Army engineers who were working on it. The Germans were not too happy that the bridge was captured. They had sent a flying court-martial. They did this, and they found the 5 officers who were in charge of controlling the bridge guilty of cowardice and dereliction of duty and sentenced them to death. They bring their own firing squad with them, and 4 of them were shot by a firing squad that very day. A 5th officer, the lucky one, though condemned to death, had already been captured by the Americans and was a prisoner of war, so he escaped. Now, after the loss of the bridge, Hitler fires von Rundstedt again. He brings Kesselring in from Italy to command the troops in the west, though there's really not very much they can do. There's Kesselring. On March 27th, Patton and the Third Army crossed the Rhine south of Remagen. They built these pontoon bridges. They're actually floating bridges. You can see they do is they start tying these boats up, little like small pontoon boats alongside each other, and then they lay a roadway down on top of them. Montgomery will cross the Rhine River north of Remagen on these pontoon bridges. So the American Army and the British Army and the Canadians are now across the river. Now, in late March, early April of 1945, the Allied forces surround the last major German military force in the Ruhr Valley. As we see on the map here, as they get close, they're going to be pushing out toward and getting across the Rhine River, and they will surround the German army in the Ruhr Valley. You see the cities of Essen and Dortmund. Essen is like the Pittsburgh of Germany. It's where all their steel mills are. Dortmund has got a lot of mines and steel mills. So this is the heart of Germany's industrial. So by this being captured, it pretty much is like the end of Germany. The Germans do fight hard in that last few weeks, and the Allies suffer very heavy casualties. But by April 21st, 325,000 Germans, soldiers, mostly led by Model, were forced to surrender. By this time, we see a lot of old men and young boys there. Here we see an American tank giving a ride to a lot of American soldiers riding through these German towns. You can see the white flags out everywhere. Here's a picture of the Allies utilizing the good German highway system, the Autobahn. The center of the highway is being used to march hundreds of thousands of German prisoners back to Allied prisoner of war camps. Model himself doesn't surrender with his men. He actually commits suicide instead. Now, sadly, on April 12th, President Franklin Roosevelt dies. Roosevelt did a great job. You see, I'm wearing my Roosevelt shirt today. Roosevelt dies, and he's replaced by the Vice President, Harry S. Truman. Truman will lead America through the rest of the war and into the post-war period. Eisenhower decides to have the Allied troops crush the remaining German forces in western and southern Germany instead of going to Berlin. He knows the Germans will fight very hard defending Berlin, so he doesn't want to waste American and British lives. He figures the Russians, who want to have the glory of capturing Berlin, are going to cost a lot of Russian lives, and he'd rather see the Russians lose lives than the Americans and the British and the Canadians. Now, the Elbe River is the stopping point. It's right in the center of Germany. Here we see on a map. The map comes up. You can see the blue line that goes right through there. So the Americans will not go any further than that and let the Russians have the glory of capturing Berlin. Many Allied commanders like Patton and Montgomery are not happy with this, as they both wanted to have the glory for themselves. But Eisenhower, not caring about glory and caring more about American and British and Canadian lives, lets the Russians do it. On April 25th, American and Soviet troops meet at the Elbe River. Here they are shaking hands. This is one of the famous pictures. The Americans on the left and the Russian soldiers on the right. They were actually standing in the middle of a blown up bridge, what was left of the bridge, shaking hands. All right, well, that completes the section on the Americans' victory in Europe. Berlin, of course, is still there. Hitler is still alive. But that'll be the next section. We're going to be talking about the Russians moving in and capturing Berlin. I hope you enjoyed this section, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.